Forms. In previous webinars, we've looked at Google Classroom, Google Meet, how to organize your calendars and Meet. We also looked at creating Google Sites last week. If you're interested in any of those, all our webinars are recorded and they're available on the YouTube channel so that we can get the links over to you. You can just request that in the chat on this webinar. If it's something you feel you've missed and you'd like to know a little bit more and you've got a Turn It On consultant, you could also ask them when they're in, and I'm sure they'd be welcome to help you too. Wanted to flag that Google Apps and also getting into Google Forms is available across most devices. There isn't a dedicated Forms app, but if you open up a web browser on any device, whether it's a mobile phone or a tablet or a computer of some description, as long as you've got a web browser, you can log in and you can get to Google Forms. It doesn't even have to be Google Chrome, but I would recommend using Google Chrome because it works best with Google Apps and G Suite. And Google Chrome is free to download, so you can just go online, search on Google, and then download and install Google Chrome. If you've got restrictions on your device because it's managed by your school, just ask your IT administrator or raise a support ticket and they get it sorted out for you. I would also say, if you could always get the latest version of Google Chrome web browser, it helps. So if you need to check that, you can get your IT guys to have a look for you. All good. Something else I wanted to make you aware of, you may know this from being on previous Google training sessions, but Google launched a dedicated website called Teach From Home. Teach From Home is to give you support and resources during distance learning. It's quite an unusual situation we have at the moment. We've never found ourselves in this situation. Being a previous teacher myself, I couldn't have imagined having to deliver lessons across the internet to children or having to record things and then they pick it up. It is unusual times, but it also means there's quite a high demand on you as an individual to learn a new skill set, which is why we're doing these webinars, but also you might want some support. You probably will say at some point during this session, Martin, it's all well and good, you're giving us all this information, but I possibly couldn't retain it or I can't scribble it down. Well, you don't need to worry. If you went to this website, so you can just do a search called Teach From Home. Teach From Home is a dedicated website. Get rid of that message at the bottom there. And it's available in lots of different languages. If you scroll down, you can download the content of this website in a native language. So if you've got parents that need to support their pupils, or you've got staff that aren't necessarily natively English speakers, you can download it in all those different languages, and there's more going on there all the time. You can also convert the website itself to appear in different languages, and the button for that is normally at the top, but for some reason it's not there today. Yesterday. When you scroll down, you've got the different areas of G Suite. So we've covered things like video calls with Hangout Meets. We've also looked at live stream. We've looked extensively at Google Classroom and Google Sites. But today, this purple form here is Google Forms. So if you want to open Google Forms, you can do it by pressing the button there. And I'll also show you another way in just a moment. But if you want the support after the session and you want to go back and work your way through it in your own time, press tutorial. That'll open up a new tab. What you get is a website here, and there'll be some suggested links underneath that website for you to go and get more information, and it tells you what you can do with Google Forms. Often the comments are quite useful because people will direct you to other resources. So that's there too, so you can get some more support after the call. So go to Teach From Home, scroll down. When you get down to the Google Forms, tutorial is the support, opens the Google form. That's if you're in the website. But at the same time, if you happen to be in your Google Drive or in your Gmail, over here next to your name, you've got the Google App Launcher. And on the app launcher, you can scroll down. I've pinned my Google Forms because I dragged it up to my frequently used apps. But if you scroll down, you've got more apps. So it might be sat down here, hidden away in more apps. Most of the time it's up here in Forms. So if you click Forms, it'll open up another tab in your web browser and you'll be able to get to Google Forms, and you will see something that looks a little bit like that, but you won't see the information along the bottom because they're forms that I've created. But you'll probably see plus and a blank, and you'll see a template option. So if I just pop back to the presentation and we go down. So what we're going to cover in today's session is we are going to look at improving questions or quizzes and creating them. We're going to look then at how you build a form. We'll also look at how you get the data out of a form once you've got it created. We'll have a brief look at some of the advanced options. So today we are not laboring on advanced Google Form features. It's something you can go away and explore if you wish, but we're going to cover the basics. We're also going to have a look at how you share Google Forms and then how you might link into other other applications that are available in G Suite. So not only is G Suite available with all the Google core apps, you've got other apps that go into it too. The rest of it is going to be live in Google Forms. So I'm going to go back over to the Google Forms tab. So just to familiarize you, if you haven't used it before and you need to search and find something, use the search box at the top. When you start to get lots and lots of forms, and I've seen some teachers with 50, hundreds of forms underneath here, it gets quite cluttered. You can organize them by changing between list view, which has them like that, so you don't have to see a preview, or you can have them in what's called thumbnail preview, so you can get a feel for what's actually in there. That means you can just see less of them. You can sort them A to Z, and you can also jump out and open a file picker, which is a bit like your Google Drive. At the moment, you can select ones that are owned by anyone in your school, because you'll be working on a G Suite in your school, or you can have the ones that are just owned by you, or you can have the ones that aren't owned by you, but maybe are created by colleagues or created by pupils. With the template gallery, you'll always see a few up here at the top based on what you did last time. You can then press the button, and where it says turn it on limited, it will say the name of your school. So your school might create default templates to use in Google Forms, and it saves you time because they've got the formatting and the setup that you're expected to use, a bit like if you're using a template for Google Docs or Google Sheets. But most of the time you'll go in general and you'll use one of the templates that Google have created. So the first thing you're going to decide is, am I using a Google form for collecting data and questions, or am I using a Google form for collecting information in a quiz, for instance? So Google Forms are not just great for getting information in a class, they're really good for getting information as well from parents or colleagues if you're doing something whole staff. So there's lots of options there about how you want to use the Google form itself. You may be able to go in and it'll have sample questions already in there that could be useful to adapt, or you may need to go in there and start from scratch and delete a lot of them and just then start adding your own. But what you've got is the formatting, the fonts, the colors, and all the backgrounds sorted, so that you don't have to worry about doing that, and it just saves more time. I often get asked, are there libraries of these already created? And there isn't, strictly speaking, a Google Forms library where you can go and pick up pre-made versions. However, there's lots of communities online that share them, or will send you share links so you can get their one for science or maths or something, and you can bring it in and then just tweak it instead of having to create it from the beginning. So if you press plus blank, it will create a new form. It won't create a quiz. And by default, you get an untitled form. So you need to give it a title. So let's say whole school survey. You might want to give it a bit of a description, the context while you're surveying the staff. And then in here, you start to get the area where you build your questions. You've got lots of different question types. So when you press on the side, there's a floating toolbar that always stays here on the side. If you press add question, it will automatically add in another question, and it sits underneath the previous question. If you want to go back and edit that question, you just click on it. So you navigate backwards and forwards. In the top right-hand corner, you can choose the type of question that you have. They are pretty self-explanatory, and we'll look at some real versions of those in a minute. I've made a demo version so you can look at how those are in reality. We'll look at them from an editing point of view as you as a teacher, and we'll look at them at an end user, a pupil or another member of staff or a parent getting the form, and what it looks like to them. You can also import questions. So I said you couldn't pick up whole forms unless you've got somebody who's kindly sharing them with you, but you can import questions. If you've got questions that are in other forms, you can import them from forms to save time. So if you know a colleague had developed a maths quiz or something, where mine's called blank quiz, you could click on that and you could say select, and it will bring the questions into yours, and then you can merrily adjust them from there. So that does save some time. Adding a title and a description, if you click that, it breaks up the questions in your form. So if you have titles, you might want to call it section 1, and then the title here could be dragged up above my question. So my title here is section 1. And I might give a description. This is about staff well-being. And if you want to, you can always duplicate things to save time. If I spelled well-being correctly, or you could delete it. There are hidden options over always on the 3 dots. So if you click that, you can say, well, do I want it to have a description or do I not want it to have a description? So when I click on it, it will get rid of the description. But if you get rid of the description, please be aware it deletes everything you typed in there. It's just done with mine. You can add an image. So if you click add image, you can upload from your computer. So if you press the browse button, it will look at your computer and you can look in the folders on your computer and you can bring a picture in. Or you can get one from your camera. If you know the URL or the web address of a website where you want to get one from, you can type it in there. Photos are photos built into Google G Suite. Google Drive will look in your personal Google Drive and the folders there that you can see, and you can pick up images from there. Or you don't need to leave. You could go on a Google image search. So let's say I want school, enter, and then Google will find everything about school. Cake school I got instead of school. Let's put school, put primary school. Finds a primary school. Let's take a building. And I press insert, and then all of a sudden in will come the image, and it's just in there straight away like that. You can also embed videos. So depending on the filtering in your school, you can put YouTube straight in there. I know a lot of teachers use YouTube quite heavily for teaching, to get odd clips or maybe some background information you're going to use in the context of a lesson. So YouTube could go straight in there. I won't search now in case it brings up something inappropriate, but yeah, there you go. Adding sections as well as those heading sections, you can add a section in down here. So you can see there, that is a defined section because I put one in, section 1, saying section 2 of 2. You can give it a title, you can give it a description, and you happily build your form. If you want to make it look a bit more personalized, up at the bar at the top here, you can customize the theme. So there's lots of different colors. If you want a color that's not there, press plus, and you've got a palette and you can choose practically any color you want. So I'm going to press add, and now that's in there, and it automatically changes everything in the foreground to the color that you've chosen. Everything in the background is a pale version with the brightness toned down. You could also choose the shades of your background color. So if I don't like the one it's chosen by default, I'm going to go for that one. Okay, that's a bit more colorful. I could choose the font style. The font styles are limited, so you get basic, or you get more of a handwriting font, or you get formal. Playful is a bit like Comic Sans. So that's options to quickly change the themes. You can also choose an image for your header to make that more interesting. So if you press choose image, you've got lots of default ones that you can sift by category. You can also upload your own, or you can go to photos. So very often you're personalizing what your header would be. So if it was a staff survey, I'm going to choose that because let's say I'm surveying a school with some science staff in it. And there we go. There's the header into there, and away it goes straight away. So it's automatically sorted out. Well, without any further delay, I think we should have a look at an example form. So one of the other things, I'll come back to you later about send and share options. One of the other things you want to know is, well, how on earth do I get back to where I started? Well, all you do is you click up in the top left-hand corner where it says Forms Home, which is that purple form, and it will take you back to where you were before with the template gallery, and then down, say, Recent Forms. If you can't see the ones that are owned by you, you might need to say Owned by Me, and that will bring up the ones there. That's the one we were just playing around with. It's untitled, but I've got here an example one, and I've got an example quiz as well. So this is an example collection form. Just look at the question types. So example questions. If I want to see what it looks like for the person who's going to be filling in the form, I can press preview. Now this, instead of being the view that we've just been looking at constantly, is the editing view that you would see while you were building. This is the final view that you would get if you sent it to someone, and this is how it would appear to them in a clean format without any of the edit options. So if I went down here, does your child have a medical condition? I'm going to type no, and then I might say describe medical condition. I'm going to put not applicable. And I'm going to go down here to multiple choice. So how do you travel to school? I'm going to say I walk. Checkbox. So multiple choice lets you have 1. Checkboxes let you have 2. So in here, all I've used are section headers to head this up. I'd like a hot packed lunch for my child. I've now got a drop down message. So I am going to be Church of England as my religion. I won't do it now, but I can upload and submit files over Google Forms. So if you wanted a parent thinking about how you might use Google Forms more on the administrative side of the school, you might want them to send back admissions information. Well, they could upload that and they could return that, and you would then receive it in your Google Drive as an upload from the Google form, and then you could use that. So it's a smart way of sending a collection format to a parent and getting them to upload their file straight in through Google Forms and into your Google Drive. You can also ask things to be rated on a linear scale. So how satisfied are you? Or how happy are you? I'm 9. I'm quite happy about filling this in. And then you can get a more complicated multiple choice grid, which looks a bit like a matrix. So how satisfied are you with the score? The academic support in my school is quite poor. Pastoral support is going to be excellent, and the administration is quite average. And then down here, the tick box is another version of that. So you've got yes and no's, and what you can have in there compared to above, there's only one choice, but you could have multiple choice. So you need to think very carefully, is it appropriate format all the time? Because you might not want a yes and no about the activity because you'd be confused about what the person that submitted it meant. You can also get dates. So if that, let's say in a fictional scenario, the parent's submitting some information, you can get them to enter the date they submitted it. So I'm going to choose today's date. You could also get them to put the time in that they submitted it as well. So I'm going to go submit, and then that is sent in. Your response has been recorded. You can have any message you like there, and we'll show you where to customize those. So it could be, thank you very much for completing the form. A member of staff will be in contact with you shortly, or something like that. So there is the form that's been submitted. Because that was me opening it up as a person receiving the form, it's in a tab there, and I can still go back over to here, or I can go back to there. If I finish with it, I just press the cross and it goes. You don't need to save it. It automatically submits it. So me, as the person that owns the form, I've got the ability to edit my questions, and that's what you just viewed, but that's what it looks like from the editing side. But now we talked about getting data in. Responses, you can see, has got a number 1. It's telling you you've got a response. You can have responses to notify you by email. So instead of you having to go and check the form, it can email you to your Gmail that you've got a response in, and it lets you know to go and look at the Google form. In fact, you just press the link in the email and it brings you straight over, so you don't need to navigate around. So this is what it looks like when you start to get data in. You can see the individual responses. Once you get more than one, you can either view the responses individually, or you can see a summary, the average, or the mean, I should say, of all the responses that have come in. If it's something that will give you a pie chart, so if it was walking car, it will start to build up so you can see from your survey graphically just what it starts to look at. The one there about submitting the file, it's got a prompt for you to go and look in your folder in Google Drive, and you can go and pick up the forms or the documents that have been put in. That's one way to view the data that's sent in. The other one is up here, nestling in the corner. You can create a spreadsheet which opens up in Google Sheets. So Google Sheets is the equivalent of Microsoft Excel. If I press this, I will either add it to an existing spreadsheet, or I will create a new spreadsheet. That comes up the first time. The beauty of it is that you can then analyze in a spreadsheet, and you can start to apply all the analysis that a spreadsheet would allow. So here are the titles, which are our questions, and here for my single user is the one set of responses, and it tells me when they submitted it and the time and the date. You can also, and I'll show you where to add this in a bit, you can get their email addresses, and you can ask them to leave their name so you know who submitted the data if you wish to, or it can be anonymous like this one. Then you can manipulate it however you see fit in your spreadsheet. The other great thing about this is once you've created a Google Sheet, every time you get a response and data is inputted into the Google form, it will automatically be pushed out into the spreadsheet which sits in your Google Drive, and it will be updated. So you don't have to manually go through and press the button each time. That just happens. So when you go to the spreadsheet, you don't even really have to look at the responses that have come in your Google form unless you really want to look at it there. You could just go and view them in the spreadsheet. You might want to see the graphical pie charts or something else in there that's of interest to you. But you've got 2 ways of looking at the data you get in and then analyzing that data further still. So maybe you're going to feedback to the staff about their survey and what they felt about the school and so forth. So there's a lot of flexibility about collecting the data and then what you do with the data once you have it. I'm going to go back into the Google Forms. I'm going to go back over to the other form that we've got prepared for this session. So we've got a quiz. You can see up here, you can create a blank quiz. I've pinned that in my templates. If you don't know where that is, normally you go into template gallery and underneath education section, blank quiz is there. You can also convert a standard Google form into a quiz, but we'll go into the blank quiz. So here, if I preview it, it's something I'm going to use as a teacher to share my class. This one is on maths. So I've decided to put in a picture, and I'll show you where to do that in a minute, to go with my question. So there's the clock, and the pupil just picks which the answer is. So what I've done behind here is I've predetermined what is the correct and incorrect answer so that the pupil gets instant feedback and the form marks itself when they press submit. You can also, as a pupil, get a copy of your responses. And down here, I'm looking for sections of the shape. So that's a multiple click, and I want them to pick everything except the incorrect answer. So you build more and more questions in, depending on your subject, depending on how big you want it to be, whether it's a consolidation to check learning, or whether you're wanting them to have a mini plenary in the middle of a lesson, or whether you're going to do something to assess where they are before you engage in a new piece of learning within the subject. I'm just going to jump back out of that one. I'm not going to submit it. So on this side, when you're building your questions in your quiz, so your class quiz is here. If I click on the build, you can see green ticks next to the side. If you go down to the bottom left-hand corner, there's an answer key. And in the answer key, you need to tick the radial buttons here, the little round boxes, to determine what the correct answers are. And then you just hit done. And then when it comes to the pupils using it, it's already built in the background, not that they see it, that the questions are there. And you could also down here insist that it's the required question, so they can't skip it and submit the form without answering it. You could duplicate it if you just want to amend it, so you can have different clock faces and times. You haven't got to worry about laying the question out again, so that speeds up the process of making one. And under the dots, you've got the option to give a description, or you can shuffle the options order. If you enable shuffle the options order and you've got a class full of children doing this, it means that the answers to the question won't all be in the same order. So if someone sat on a desk with another 2 or 3 pupils and they say it's the bottom answer, it's the bottom answer, well, though it won't be on the next pupils because theirs will appear in a different order. So the shuffle option order there is quite useful for that, to stop them all sharing answers and not really having an understanding of the learning, but just putting it in because the person next door has told them what the answer is. It helps on that and makes them really think about what they're answering. The responses work in exactly the same way. So you see the responses appearing down here, and you can send them out to a spreadsheet if you need to look at them from a teaching point of view to assess progress in learning. The themes are the same. You've got exactly the same theme options. The preview option is the same. So I'm just going to pop back out of here, and I'm going to go back into, let's go back into the one that we were building at the beginning, which was my imaginary form. Said we'd look at how we share it with people. So the send button is sitting there quite loud and proud. If I press the send button, I've got an option here to share it via email on that tab. I can share it via a link on that tab, or I can share it by what's called HTML code on that tab. So if I was building a Google site like we did in one of our previous webinars, or I'm using Google Classroom, I can take that code and I can embed it straight in. If you're sticking it in your school website, take that code and put it all in there. You can then decide on the size it will display as inside of the site you're putting it in. So you can decide the number of pixels, the width and the height, and you can just determine that by changing the numbers in the box. The values will change there. If you want to send somebody a link, so maybe you're going to send this an email, or it's a clickable link in another document using some learning in Google Classroom, or you're putting this in Stream in Google Classroom, you can just put the link in there, and then when they click the link, it takes the person straight to the form and they can fill it in. If you want to email it, you can email the person directly from within Google Forms. You don't need to leave here. So you put their email address in. So I might put one of my colleagues in. There's Daryl that I work with. Subject is whole school survey. The message is I've invited you to complete this form, but you can add to that. You can include the form in an email, or just send it as a form directly and hit send, and away it will go. If you want to invite people to collaborate, in other words, to edit the form, you can also do that here. So it could be that I invite you to fill in the form is changed to I invite you to change this form or create this form, and it just emails them direct, and then they open it up and it gives them editing rights instead of putting them into a mode where they just fill it in and complete it and send back a response. As with everything, the dots hide more options. So when you click the dots on the side, if you want to make a copy because you don't want to mess up the original version you've got, click make a copy. You'll then be left within the copy. The original version will be sat in all your forms on the front page. You can move the whole thing to the bin so you can delete it from within. You can get a pre-filled link. So if you want a pre-filled link to share, click it there. There's your pre-filled link. So you can take the URL out the top, which is the website address, and you can send it across from there. You can print it from in here. Google Forms are really meant to be engaged with online, but if you need to get a printout, it will just lay out all the questions and it will give you a version of what the options were, such as it's multiple choice. Those were the options, but it's not interactive. So I wouldn't say print it out. It comes out as a PDF. Add collaborators you can also do here. So if you wanted someone in your school to collaborate with you, you can invite them in to edit it. So at the moment it's private, so only I can access it. But if I want to invite people, I'll do it with Daryl again. There's Daryl. I can choose in here next to the pen option whether I want them to edit or not. If I don't want them to edit and I just want them to view the editable version, I can untick edit. And now when they open it, they can see it, but they couldn't make any changes. But that's slightly frustrating for them. And then you press send. You can add a message in there as well by pressing the message box and type it in there. You could also have a copy sent yourself to remind you that you sent them. Going back to the options in here, you've got the more complex things down the bottom. So if you are somebody who understands HTML, or maybe you're an IT administrator and you're embedding into a website, you can go into a script editor mode. And in here now you are in HTML and you can start to code with it. Again, I said we'd only briefly talk about advanced options, so we're not going to labor that. I'm going to go back into my form. One of the other areas I said we'd look at apps that can go into the Google Form. So far, I've just spoken about the way that Google Form links to other apps in G Suite. If you want to bring in external apps, Google have an app store that links with all of their apps out to outside partners that have developed for specific functions or needs where Google Forms doesn't do something or doesn't have a function, but you can bet your bottom dollar that somebody else has come up with an app that does it. So if you wanted a timer, for instance, that times how long someone's been completing a form, if you went to their domain install, that would install it for everyone in your G Suite domain. In other words, anyone who has got an account in your G Suite for your school. If you just want it for you and not anybody else, and most of the time it is for you, you click individual install. And then depending on how your G Suite has been set up, and the administrator of your G Suite might give you permissions to do that, or they might not give you permissions to do that. So then down the bottom here, you can see what it looks like with your time going along, and you get an overview description. So there's a huge marketplace full of third-party apps to add additional functions into Google Forms. So you can have a look through there to see what interests you. You might think of a app that actually you could use, or you might go in here with a specific need to find an app that fulfills a problem that you've got, and then you just search for whatever it is. So that's the App Store, and we're not going to labor on that today, but essentially that's how it is. And then it will plug in here, and whatever you've asked it to do, whether it adds another different question type or puts that timer up the top, you would see it in the format you've got in here. Down in the very bottom, you've got another preferences section, which is hidden inside the dots. When you click the preferences, or you should click the preferences and it shouldn't disappear, you've got the option in here to collect email addresses. So I showed you in the spreadsheet, you might want email addresses or not. So if you do want email addresses, tick the box and it will then get the email address from the person submitting the form. There will need a Gmail address if they're going to do that. It won't work if they're submitting from a different email tenancy. So if you know that you've got people using Outlook or whatever else, then leave that unticked. But you can add a question in to say confirm your email address and make it a required question so you still get their email. So it's neat and tidy if you've got everyone using G Suite in Gmail. Click that. Otherwise, you need to put a question in. You can make all questions required there. And you can also default the quiz point values here. So in a quiz, the point values are 0, but you can start assigning points like 1 point per question. Another option, if you were looking at this in a form, is you've got the option to convert. So we're in a quiz now, so it doesn't show it, but you've got an option to convert a form into a quiz, and you can do it in the same section down the bottom. So that saves you time having to rebuild something. Well, that is Google Forms. It's as simple, as straightforward as that. All you would need to do now is start to practice with it. Build a few dummy runs. You can see it can get quite complicated. So over here, I've built a form with a school where they wanted to use it to get school visits consents. And we've got 3 sections. We get the name of the child, we get the class teachers, we get their medical and dietary requirements. And this goes to the parent to get consent under GDPR for a trip. They also get whether we can administer pain relief on the trip. And then they've got an untitled section there, which does need titling up, about the details for them to contact them if we needed to get to them in an emergency. And then all of that's popped into a spreadsheet, and the member of staff or the staff running the trip have got all the details there. You might get it from your MIS system like RM Integris or Capita-SIMS, but if you needed to get it for a specific trip and actually it wasn't in your MIS system, you could have a Google form for that. So there's lots and lots of uses for Google Forms. Well, I am going to pop back into the presentation and the Hangout Meet, and I'm going to stop sharing and stop presenting. But now I'm going to have a look at the conversation. I'm going to ask, I've tried adding an image in the past, the school logo, but it cropped it. Do you know why? So Tyler's Green Middle School, it crops it because you've got to get the correct resolution of picture. It is slightly fussy sometimes, so you would need to change the resolution in a picture editor. So on Windows 10 or on your Chromebook, if you're Chrome-based, you can just resize the picture, save the picture in a smaller size, and then pop the picture in. So but you can also get websites that do picture resizing on the fly. So if it's not a picture with a pupil in, for instance, and it wouldn't cause a GDPR issue, you could pop the picture into one of those websites and resize on there. Are you able to share your school visits consent and admission forms? So we have a ready-made one. If you're using, this is Nikki I'm answering now, if you're using a pre-created admissions form from the LA or something, you'll need to recreate it in Google Forms first, unfortunately, but you'll only have to do that once. And then you can share that directly from Google Forms, but you will have to go through recreating it in Google Forms first. It might sound like it's going to take ages, but once you get into the swing of question types and how Forms works, it doesn't take long. And if there's a few of you in the office team that haven't been furloughed or something like that, I'd be able to go in and create quite quickly, because you could all collaborate together and just be in there at once, all creating questions. Another question that's appeared in the chat. So Robin, we are mainly using slides and Google Classroom, and the children benefit from the private messaging if they are unsure of something. Is there an option for this with forms in quizzes? So in the forms in quizzes, that's a good question. I don't think there is an option for that directly in Google Forms in quizzes. I would say use either Hangout Meets or put it in Stream in the Classroom. Admittedly, that does mean you've got to go between the form, between the tab you're using where Forms are and Classroom are, Hangout Meets. But I don't even know of a plugin to put that functionality into Google Forms, I'm afraid. Another question, Philip. I may have missed Martin, but can you print a hard copy? Yes, you can. There is a print option there. So in Google Forms, if you went into one of the forms, you've got the option to print the form out. Actually, it would help if I reshared my screen with you. Let me reshare my presentation. I'm going to share. So if I went back across to my form, so I'm in my form here now. I've gone to the 3 dots on the corner, and there's the option print. So you can print it. Again, I do question the value of printing a Google form, except you may need to in some situations, but it comes out as a very static item, and it's quite hard sometimes to get how the form works or how it flows just from the printout. But you might need it. You might be a paper person, you just prefer to see it on paper. So absolutely, you can print from a Google form if you need to. I'll stop sharing again. Some more questions coming in. Can you link a new form in the feedback for a quiz or an assessment? Pandora, would you be able to unmute your mic and explain a bit more about what you mean there, please?
Hi, so I mean that if can you hear me?
Yeah, I absolutely can hear you, yes.
If you are doing, let's say, a math assessment, and you can then program feedback if they on the answer key if they get it correct. If, let's say, they get it all correct, could you link an extended sort of like higher ability form for them to then complete afterwards?
You could put that. So I've not, again, I haven't looked for an app to do that. There may be one to do that, but you could put in the feedback at the end. So when you, like I showed you, where you submitted the form for just a normal form where you're getting data collected, in the quiz at the end, you could put a comment in there with a link to another Google form that says, well done, you've got all these correct, and you can prompt the Google form that when you've got it completed, it displays that message, and they can click that link if they've got them all correct, and then they can go off to a more challenging, higher level quiz.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Any other questions? I've got nothing else in the chat. Anybody else want to unmute their mic and ask anything? Okay. Well, at that point, I will just say a big thank you to everybody that's come along today. I know that a lot of you are busy. You're either juggling family life and being on working from home, or you're still teaching remotely, or you're working in schools. So thank you so much for coming along to today's session. We will be doing more Google sessions, and they'll get advertised, and you can sign up to them through Eventbrite again. We're mixing them in between with Microsoft Office 365 webinars and sessions. So there's normally 1 or 2 Google sessions in a week, and I would love to see a few of you back there. If any of you want to hang around and ask questions as people drop off, please feel free to do so. I'll remain on here in the Google Meet. But otherwise, have a safe day, good luck, and I will see you all again very soon. Thank you.